At 3:11 a.m., Officer Reed saw something that would stay in his mind for the rest of his life. He was doing his third round of the night shift inside California's most secure supermax, Pelican Bay. The hallway lights buzzed, the air felt colder than usual, and the cameras showed nothing unusual. Until one of the motion sensors in the security housing unit, a place where the most dangerous inmates in America are kept alone, flashed red for half a second. He stopped walking. Every door around him was locked. Every inmate was accounted for. Still, he heard it, a faint whisper like a breath close to his ear, but it came from inside the wall. "Stay awake," it said. Reed turned fast, flashlight sweeping the concrete. Nothing. Just the long corridor with its narrow slot windows and thick metal doors. He radioed the control booth. "Unit C, possible malfunction in Pod 2, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Copy that," came the voice of Officer Laura Torres from the booth. "Motion sensors are clear on my end." Then click. One of the doors at the end of the hallway twitched just slightly. A noise like a bolt sliding halfway. Reed froze. "Torres," he said quietly, "you seeing that on your monitor?" "Negative," she said. "All green here." The clicking stopped. For a moment there was total silence. No footsteps, no fan hum, no radio buzz. Just the feeling that the building itself was breathing. Then from one of the cells, a man started laughing. It was deep, broken laughter, the kind that didn't sound like a joke. "Who's laughing?" Reed asked. Torres flipped through cameras. "Cell 19, she said. "That's Daniels. Been on suicide watch 2 weeks. "Yeah," Reed said, his voice a whisper. Except that sound's not coming from his cell. The laughter moved. It drifted down the hallway, echoing from one wall to the other, too loud for one person. Reed's flashlight beam shook slightly in his hand. He looked up at the camera in the corner and saw its red light flicker, then go out. That's when everything changed. The cell intercom crackled to life on its own. The same voice from before whispered again, "Stay awake." The radio in Reed's hand screamed static. He dropped it. The lights flickered 3 times and then steadied again. When they did, he saw something written on the floor at the far end of the hall, dark, almost like dust. "We watched too." He took a step forward, but before he could move closer, a heavy door slammed shut behind him. The sound echoed through the whole block. And that's where this story begins. Hours earlier, before the strange noises and camera failures, Pelican Bay had been calm. The kind of calm that only happens between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., when most inmates are asleep, and every sound feels louder than it should. Night patrol is the hardest shift in a supermax. Officers say it's not just about danger, it's about time. The walls never change, the air never moves, and every hour stretches like a full day. Reed had started his shift at 10 p.m., signing off from the command center and walking through 6 locked gates before reaching the SHU corridor. The same steel smell always greeted him: metal, disinfectant, and cold concrete. The only light came from the dull fluorescent bulbs that never go dark. Torres sat in the booth, surrounded by screens showing every cell and corridor. She joked earlier that she could feel the building watching. Reed had laughed then, but by midnight he wasn't laughing anymore. At 12:30 he began his second patrol. Some inmates were awake, pacing their small cells, mumbling to themselves. Others slept face down, the blankets pulled tight. A few had pressed notes or sketches against the slot windows, drawings of clocks, eyes, and birds. Reed didn't look too long at those. At 1:45 he checked the outer tiers. The fans in the ceiling rattled softly. He could hear water dripping somewhere down the hall. He passed cell 8, empty since last week. The man who lived there had been transferred after refusing food for 10 days. The walls were bare except for faint scratches near the floor. Reed stopped in front of cell 11, where an inmate named Connor sat awake, staring through the slot. "Lights keeping you up?" Reed asked. "Lights never go off," Connor said. His voice was calm, too calm. "You close your eyes, they follow you in there." "Get some rest," Reed said, trying to sound casual. Connor smiled. "You don't rest either." "Not really." Reed walked on, pretending not to hear the rest of what the inmate said. By 2 a.m. the cameras showed the normal night routine. One inmate was exercising in slow, repetitive movements. Another was sitting perfectly still on his bunk. Everything looked routine, but something about the sound felt off. Reed noticed that his own footsteps had an echo, a double beat. He stopped. The echo stopped. He stepped again. The echo came back, half a second too late. That's when he knew something was wrong. He looked up at the hallway camera. Its little red light blinked once, then died. "Control, camera 12 just went out," he said into his radio. "Copy," Torres replied. System shows active. Probably just the feed. But the feed wasn't dead, it was looping. On Torres' monitor, Reed could still be seen walking down the hall. The problem was he wasn't moving anymore. Control, Reed said again. I think. Then came the whisper. Stay awake. The sound wasn't over the radio or from any speaker. It came from the air itself. Reed spun around, flashlight raised, but the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no movement. Only the faint hum of electricity behind the walls. He looked up at the camera again, and that's when he saw it. A shadow inside the reflection of the glass dome, standing right behind him. He turned, but nothing was there. That was the first moment he truly understood what veterans had told him on his first day. Night patrol isn't just about watching others. It's about what watches you back. He forced himself to keep moving, checking every cell door one by one. Most inmates were asleep now. He stopped at cell 19, Daniels, the man who'd been on suicide watch. The inmate was facing the wall, shoulders shaking, whispering something. Daniels, Reed said softly. You good? Daniels turned around, eyes wide, grin too wide to be real. You hear them? He said. They walk when you stop. Go back to sleep, Reed said. Daniels pressed a hand to the glass. You think you're the one guarding this place? He said. They guard you. Reed stepped back. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't need to. When he reached the end of the corridor, he noticed the air had changed. It was colder, heavy, like before a storm. That's when the motion sensor flashed red, and he heard the whisper again. Then came the laugh. Then the door twitch. Then the slam. And when the sound stopped, Reed realized the whispering hadn't been inside the walls at all. It had come from his own radio, still hissing on the floor, replaying words he hadn't spoken. The voice said once more, faint and slow. Stay awake. He froze. Because this time the voice wasn't alone. Another voice, lower, rougher, unmistakably human, added 3 words that made every hair on his neck rise. We are too. Reed did not move. The radio on the floor hissed like a snake. Stay awake, the thin voice said again. Then the second voice followed, slow and human. We are too. Control, Reed said, picking the radio up, trying to keep his hand from shaking. I need eyes on pod 2. I need you now. I'm with you, Torres answered. He could hear her breathing fast, but her voice stayed steady. Sergeant is on the way. Hold position. Do not approach any door alone. Reed swallowed. Copy. The hallway looked the same as always, white light, gray walls, steel doors. But now the air felt wrong, thicker, like when a storm sits over a town and waits. The motion sensor had gone still. The laugh had stopped. The words on the floor, we watched too, were fading like dust rubbed by air. From cell 19, Daniels called softly through the slot. Officer, he said, you okay? Reed clicked his light off and on to keep his brain awake. I'm good, he said. Stay on your bunk. I don't sleep, Daniels said almost kindly. You don't either. Back to your bunk, Reed said again. He forced his feet to move. He checked the next door. Hands. Yes. Good. He checked the next. He counted. Counting was a rope across a dark river. 1 door at a time. The Sally port buzzed. Heavy boots moved on the other side. The inner door stayed locked just as it should. The sergeant's voice came over the radio, level as a table. Reed, I'm here. We're not opening yet. Tell me what you have. Reed gave the facts. Motion flash at C12. Door twitch. Laugh moved down the hall. Intercom sparked on its own. Words on the floor. Radio repeated a voice that was not mine. Copy, the sergeant said. Any doors open? Negative. Any inmates out of place? Negative. Good. We slow this down. The sergeant's voice did not spike or dip. It was a blanket thrown over a cold night. Torres came back on. System shows all secure, she said. No open commands. But I've got a loop on camera 12. It shows Reed walking, but he's standing still. Reed nodded, though she could not see him. That matches, he said. There are myths about Supermax. People think nights are all fights and screams. But reports and interviews say the real fight is with time and tiredness. Sleep debt does odd things to a brain. It makes echoes feel like footsteps. It makes small shadows grow teeth. Officers say the trick is simple. Name what is real out loud. Don't hide it. Don't make it bigger. Don't make it smaller. Name it and keep moving. Reed named it. I see closed doors. I hear normal fan noise. I smell disinfectant. My radio is live. I am standing between 17 and 19. My path to the Sally port is clear. Good, the sergeant said. We're going to do a wellness check on you, then we'll run the tier. Torres, bring up thermal on C12. Reed, deep breath. Reed, breathe. He felt his chest rise and fall like a slow wave. He rolled his shoulders. He flexed his fingers. The simple acts pushed the fear back an inch. Thermal is gray, Torres said. No hot spots in the hall. No body heat outside cells. Copy, the sergeant said. Reed, any dizziness? Any headache? I'm okay, Reed said. Been up 20 hours across 2 shifts. That's normal for me. Not great, the sergeant said. But normal. He paused. After this you're off the floor for 15. Hydrate. Yes, sir, Reed said. He felt a small, stupid smile touch his mouth. The idea of water felt like a gift. The low part of the night slid in again. It felt almost like peace. Reed called the next doors. Cell 20. Good. Cell 21. Good. In cell 21, Daniel Price held up 2 fingers. Reed nodded. Daniel mouthed, "They move when you stop." Reed did not answer. He did not want to carry that sentence any farther than it already had. Torres went through her checklist in the booth. She lowered mic gain to filter hiss. She bumped the camera shutter so the green picture was less jumpy. She logged every second. She knew these logs would be read later by people who had slept. That mattered. The record is a kind of guard too. Ready to run the wedge? The sergeant asked. Ready, Torres said. Ready, Reed said, though the cold feeling was back and sitting behind his ribs. Inner port to green, the sergeant said. On my mark. He pressed the button. The big door stayed red. Good. He lifted his face to the small glass and peered through. Reed could see his visor, his eyes, the white line of the light across the shield. Then the building did something strange and small that only people who live inside it would notice. The hum of the lights changed by the tiniest hair. Not louder. Not softer. Just off to the side, as if a knob had slipped 1 click. The kind of change your ears know before your mind does. Hold, the sergeant said and took his hand off the button. Control? Torres said. I'm getting a micropulse on the floor sensor near the control door. Do you see anyone? Reed turned his head slowly. The hall behind him was empty. The control door behind the glass did not move. But he felt it, the faintest buzz through his boots like a phone on a desk. Copy pulse, Reed said. No visual. Log it, the sergeant said. We move anyway. Open inner port 1. The relay clicked. The door breathed. The wedge team slid in, quick and quiet. Shields up. Camera pole out front. They formed a small triangle of comm bodies and started toward Reed. The mic caught their steps. Tap, 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 steady, human, real. Reed let the sound pour over his nerves like warm water. The team reached Reed. The sergeant looked him in the eye. Check, he said. I'm awake, Reed said. I'm good. Hydrate, the sergeant said and handed him a small bottle from a pouch. Reed drank. The water tasted like copper and relief. They walked the tier together. That is how it is supposed to be, never alone when the night gets weird. They checked each door. Hands? Yes. Good. Inmates responded. 1 man snored. 1 man stared at the ceiling and said a soft prayer. 1 man had a picture of a dog taped near his slot. Reed wrote that down too. Details are anchors. Control, the sergeant said, we're clear to the end. Camera 12 is stable? It shows you, Torres said. No loop. No flicker. They reached the far end of the hall. The place where the words had been on the floor was clean now. Maybe it had been dust from shoes. Maybe it had been nothing. Maybe. Reed did not say it out loud. He kept his mouth shut and his eyes open. Hold at end, the sergeant said. They stood for 10 slow seconds and listened. The vents breathed. The building clicked once as a relay turned. The tiny echo of a cough came from cell 9. Normal. 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 Return, the sergeant said. They walked back. The low part held. The hall felt almost like a hallway again. Back at the control door, Torres waved from behind the glass. You owe me a coffee, she said through the intercom, trying to cut the tension with a thin joke. Reed almost laughed. He lifted the bottle and saluted. Then the radio in Reed's hand crackled and spoke in his own voice. Unit C clear, it said. Reed blinked. He had not pressed the button. Control, he said, pressing now. Did you copy my last? I did not, Torres said. But the system logged a transmission from your unit. It says your name. Timestamp is now. The sergeant looked at Reed's thumb, still off the push to talk. He frowned. We're done here, he said. Back to the port. We reset, call it and clear. They turned as one. The inner Sallyport door's lock light turned green by itself. No one had touched the panel. The sergeant hadn't called for it. The board in the booth still showed red. But the small light on the frame was green. The lock clicked once, a small neat sound like a pen cap being put back on. "Do not move," the sergeant said, voice suddenly iron. Tora's eyes went wide. "I did not key that," she said. Her hands were flat and visible on the desk. "Stay calm," the sergeant said. "If it slides, we brace." Reed felt something new, not fear exactly. Not dread. Something colder. The feeling you get when a rule you trust takes a step backward. The door did not open. It only hummed, a motor awake but waiting. A thin draft touched Reed's knuckles. From cell 19, Daniels whispered, "See? We're not the only ones on nights." The radio in Reed's hand popped twice. A voice that sounded like Torres spoke from it, bright and normal. "Open inner one." But Torres stood in front of him, mouth closed, shaking her head. "Kill power to the inner door," the sergeant said. "Working," Torres said. The little green light stayed on. "Manual wedge," the sergeant said. He slid the metal wedge into the track at the base. Reed dropped to a knee and pressed it with his palm. It felt solid. It felt like a promise. That was when every camera in the pod turned one click toward the Sallyport, motors ticking like a dozen tiny clocks. The hallway monitors all showed the same thing, an empty corridor staring at a closed door. The wedge under Reed's hand vibrated once like a cat's purr. "Hold," the sergeant said. Nobody breathes heavy. A thin white line of steam slid out from the door seam and curled across the floor. Cold. Very cold. Reed watched it drift like a ghost. The lock made a small, cheerful sound, ding, as if someone had swiped a badge at a grocery store. "Torres," the sergeant said, "tell me you didn't." "I didn't," she said, voice tight. The wedge jumped in Reed's hand, like something under the door had nudged it with a knee. And the inner Sallyport door began very slowly to slide open against the wedge, metal groaning, glass trembling, while a shadow shaped like a person filled the gap between the doors and stopped perfectly still.